The sound didn't wake me. That detail still matters more than anything else. If I had been asleep, if the breathing had dragged me out of a dream, I could have blamed confusion, panic, the residue of sleep clinging to my thoughts. I could have told myself my senses were misfiring, that fear had filled in the gaps, but I was awake, painfully awake. The kind of awake that has no softness left in it, no blur, no mercy. I was lying on my back, staring into the darkness above my face, counting my breaths because there was nothing else to count. No clock on the wall, no phone in my hand, just the slow rise and fall of my chest, the quiet creak of an old house settling into night. And then, between one breath and the next, I realized something was wrong. The air above my face wasn't still. It moved, not like wind, not like a draft slipping through cracks in the ceiling. It moved deliberately. A slow inhale, a careful exhale, so close that the temperature of the air changed when it passed over my skin. I didn't move. I didn't blink. And in that absolute stillness, something terrifying became clear. Whatever was breathing above me knew I was awake. Because the moment my fear settled into understanding, the breathing changed. It slowed, as if it was listening. I didn't come to the house because I believed in fresh starts. People who believe in fresh starts still think the past can be outrun. I came because I needed distance from noise, from people, from explanations that had started to sound hollow even as I repeated them to myself. I told friends I needed quiet. I told family I needed time. I told myself this was temporary. What I didn't say out loud was simpler and more honest. I was already coming apart. Sleep had become unreliable months before I ever saw the house. Not gone entirely, just fragmented. I would lie down exhausted and wake up an hour later with my heart racing, convinced I had forgotten something important. Or I would sleep deeply and wake up feeling more tired than when I closed my eyes. The night stretched, the days blurred, and somewhere in that cycle, rest stopped feeling like rest and started feeling like absence, like I was losing time instead of recovering from it. The house was supposed to fix that. It sat at the edge of a dirt road that narrowed the farther you drove, the trees crowding in until the sky became a thin ribbon overhead. There were no neighboring lights at night, no distant glow from towns or highways. When the sun went down, darkness arrived fully, decisively, like a door closing. The first time I stood on the porch, keys still warm in my hand, I noticed how quiet it was. Not peaceful, expectant, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, just paused. Inside, the house smelled like old wood and dust that had been undisturbed for years. The rooms were small, the ceilings low enough to make the space feel compressed, almost intimate in a way that made my shoulders tense. Every sound I made seemed louder than it should have been. Footsteps echoed too long, doors clicked too sharply, even my breathing felt intrusive. I slept well the first night. That detail haunts me now. I slept deeply, heavily, like my body had been waiting for permission to shut down. No dreams, no waking panic, just darkness folding over me. The second night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the darkness above me thick and absolute. The house made its small nocturnal sounds, wood cooling, distant ticks from the walls, something shifting in the attic that I told myself was temperature change. I counted breaths. I counted heartbeats. I counted cracks in the ceiling I could barely see. That was when the breathing began. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It slipped into my awareness so quietly that for a few seconds I thought it was my own. Then I realized the rhythm was wrong. Too slow, too steady, too intentional. I held my breath. The breathing continued. It wasn't beside me. It wasn't coming from the walls. It was directly above my face. close enough that when it exhaled, the air pressed gently downward, brushing my skin with faint warmth. My body locked. Every muscle went rigid, not in panic, but in recognition. Some part of me, older than reason, understood that movement would be noticed. The breathing changed when my fear sharpened. It slowed, deepened, as if responding to my awareness, as if it was pleased to be recognized. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't dare. The ceiling felt closer than it had moments before. Not visibly lower, but heavier, like something had leaned down toward me without touching. Seconds stretched into minutes. Minutes lost meaning entirely. At some point, my jaw began to ache from how tightly I was holding it. My lungs burned. Tears leaked from the corners of my eyes, sliding into my hair. The breathing never rushed, never faltered. It stayed patient, steady, unafraid. When I finally moved, jerking my head to the side, gasping for air, the breathing stopped instantly. The room snapped back into silence. The ceiling was just a ceiling again, flat, painted, ordinary. I sat up, shaking, heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away even now. I told myself what anyone would tell themselves. Old house, drafts, imagination fueled by exhaustion. I turned on the lamp and stared at the ceiling until my eyes hurt, daring it to prove me wrong. Nothing happened. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. Because when I turned the lamp off again and lay back down, the darkness felt aware. The air above my face felt charged, like it was waiting for the right moment. I didn't sleep at all that night. By morning, my body felt hollowed out, like something essential had been scooped from me and not replaced. My thoughts moved sluggishly, as if wading through thick water. I told myself it would pass, that the second night was a fluke, that the house had simply needed time to settle. By the third night, I understood the truth. The breathing wasn't an accident, it was a response, and it only happened when I was awake enough to notice it. By the fourth night, exhaustion stopped being a background condition and became the lens through which everything passed. I didn't wake up tired anymore. I woke up unfinished, like my body hadn't completed the process of becoming me. Simple actions required concentration. Standing too quickly made the room tilt. Sounds lingered longer than they should have, echoing in my skull after they ended. But worse than the physical symptoms was the way my thoughts began to lose their edges. Ideas didn't start or end cleanly. They drifted in and out, overlapping, dissolving before I could finish them. I would forget why I entered a room and then forget that I had forgotten. Time began to stutter. And through all of it, the breathing waited. The pattern became unmistakable. If I lay down, it came. If I sat still for too long, it came. If my breathing slowed naturally when exhaustion tried to pull me toward sleep, it came faster, closer, tightening the air around my face until my eyes snapped open again. The presence didn't wake me up. It kept me awake. I tested this without fully admitting it to myself. One night, I lay on the bed and closed my eyes on purpose, pretending to surrender. My chest rose and fell slowly, deliberately relaxed. I let my thoughts blur, let the edge of sleep creep in. The response was immediate. The air above my face compressed so suddenly it stole my breath. The breathing was right there, impossibly close, each inhale heavy and warm, each exhale brushing my skin with deliberate precision. I gasped. The pressure eased instantly. The breathing withdrew just enough to let me recover. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't coincidence or haunting or random manifestation. It was feedback. The house reacted to my state of awareness like a living system maintaining equilibrium. Sleep was a disturbance. Wakefulness was the desired condition. I stopped using the bed, not out of bravery, out of avoidance. I spent nights pacing the house, sitting under lights that burned my eyes, drinking water I didn't need just to feel my throat work. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, knees pulled tight, counting breaths like a ritual. Sometimes the breathing would stay distant, a vague pressure in the room. Sometimes it would approach slowly, as if curious. I learned to tell the difference by the way the air shifted before it arrived. Subtle changes in density, faint warmth gathering around my face, the sensation of being leaned toward without being touched. It never rushed, it never startled, it waited. The forest outside the house began to feel complicit. During the day, I would stand at the window and stare into the trees, searching for movement, for some external explanation that could anchor my fear to something tangible. But the woods remained still, their branches tangled and unmoving, even when the wind picked up. At night, they vanished completely. The darkness beyond the windows wasn't empty, it was depthless, like looking into something that didn't end. And sometimes, when the breathing felt particularly close, I had the irrational but unshakable sense that the presence wasn't confined to the house at all, that it extended outward, into the trees, into the ground beneath the foundation, into the air itself. The house wasn't haunted, it was nested. By the sixth night, my body began betraying me. Micro-sleep stole seconds from me without warning. I would blink and find myself standing in a different room, unsure how I got there. Once I caught myself mid-step, frozen, heart racing, with no memory of deciding to move. The breathing was always there when awareness returned, not alarmed, not impatient, as if it had been watching the absence. The most disturbing part was how quickly relief followed panic. When I woke from these lapses, disoriented and terrified, the presence adjusted, slowing its rhythm, easing the pressure until my breathing matched it again, and my body accepted that relief. I hated myself for that. One night, standing in the hallway, I became aware of something new. The ceiling felt lower, not visibly. Nothing had changed that my eyes could prove. But the space above my head felt compressed, intimate in a way that made my shoulders hunch. The air pressed down gently, insistently, as if the house were encouraging me to occupy less space. I raised my hand. The pressure increased. I lowered it. The pressure eased. A wave of nausea rolled through me. The realization settled slowly, heavily. The house wasn't just responding to my awareness, it was responding to my intent. I tried to speak to it once. I don't know why. Desperation, maybe. Or the human instinct to narrate fear, to give it shape through language. Standing alone in the living room, lights off, heart pounding, I whispered, "What do you want?" The breathing came closer than it ever had before. So close I felt the air vibrate against my lips. Not hot, not cold, neutral, measured. It didn't answer with sound. It answered with synchronization. My inhale, its inhale, perfect alignment. No delay, no correction. As if my lungs had become optional. I staggered backward, breaking the rhythm, gasping. The presence withdrew slightly, the pressure easing just enough to let me recover. The message was unmistakable. Questions disrupted alignment. Understanding wasn't required. From that night on, my body began adjusting preemptively. I would slow my breathing without realizing it. I would avoid lying down instinctively. I would stop moving when the air thickened, back away from spaces that felt wrong without needing to see why. The house rewarded compliance with distance, not absence. Distance, enough to function, enough to survive. The thought crept in quietly, dangerously, I can live like this. That thought frightened me more than the breathing ever had. Because it wasn't panic speaking, it was adaptation. One morning, if it was morning, light and dark had begun to blur. I stood in the bathroom, staring at my reflection. My eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark crescents. My skin looked stretched thin over my bones, like I'd been hollowed out from the inside. When I breathed, my chest moved, but the sensation felt delayed, disconnected. I leaned closer to the mirror. For a fraction of a second, less than a blink, I couldn't tell if the reflection was breathing with me or before me. I turned away so fast I nearly fell. Behind me, the air shifted, the breathing adjusted, closer, as if correcting me. By the end of the week, the house no longer felt like a place I occupied. It felt like a system I participated in, a rhythm, a balance. And I understood something with chilling clarity. The presence didn't need me afraid. Fear was inefficient. What it needed was awareness held open too long, identity softened by exhaustion, a body willing to follow rules it didn't remember learning. Sleep would interrupt that process. So sleep was not allowed, and the longer I stayed awake, the less I remembered what silence had felt like. By the time I realized my body was no longer asking me for permission, I had already been obeying for days. It started with small things, so small they felt like coincidences. A step that shortened on its own, a turn taken without thought, a pause that arrived before hesitation could form. At first, I told myself this was exhaustion, muscle memory misfiring under stress. But exhaustion doesn't anticipate. The house did. I noticed it most clearly in the bedroom. I hadn't entered it in 2 nights. Not properly. I would stand in the doorway, lights on, surveying the space like it belonged to someone else. The bed looked wrong now. Not threatening, not sinister, just misaligned. Like a piece of furniture placed for someone with a different body. On the 3rd night of avoidance, I stood at the threshold longer than I should have. The air inside the room thickened immediately. Not rushing, not sudden, just firm. A gentle, unmistakable pressure that made my chest tighten and my throat close. My feet stopped where they were, toes right at the line where hallway became bedroom. I hadn't decided to stop. I simply couldn't go forward. The breathing was already there, hovering, patient, arranged at a height that suggested where my face would be if I lay down. It wasn't above me yet. It was positioned, waiting for alignment. I backed away. The pressure eased. The breathing withdrew a fraction, not leaving, just giving space. Approval. That was the word my mind refused to accept, even as my body understood it perfectly. After that, the house began to feel rehearsed. I would enter a room and sense where I was supposed to stand. I would move through doorways along paths that felt smoother, less resistant, even though my eyes told me nothing had changed. Corners became impossible. I couldn't stand too close to them without feeling compressed, folded inward by the air itself. The space behind me would grow dense, urging me forward, steering me away from angles that felt wrong. The house wasn't restricting movement. It was optimizing it. The breathing began arriving before fear. That was new. I would be washing my hands at the sink, staring at the drain, when the air behind my head would warm slightly. Not close enough to panic me, just enough to remind me it was there. Observing, waiting. I learned the sound of it in layers, the deeper inhale beneath the shallow echo of my own breath, the way the air seemed to linger during exhalation, as if reluctant to leave. Sometimes it felt like the breathing wasn't coming from one place at all. Sometimes it felt like the room itself was breathing through me. The first time my body moved without my awareness, I almost didn't notice. I was standing in the living room, staring at the window, watching the forest dissolve into darkness beyond the glass. My thoughts were drifting, loose, unstructured, fraying at the edges. Then I realized I was kneeling, one knee on the floor, hands resting lightly on my thighs, spine straight, head tilted forward just enough to expose my throat. I hadn't decided to kneel. There was no memory of bending, no sensation of transition. I was simply there. The breathing was close. So close it felt like it was occupying the same space as my head, overlapping rather than approaching. The air pressed gently around my face, not suffocating, not invasive, intimate. I pushed myself upright in a burst of panic, gasping. The pressure snapped back immediately. The breathing retreated, offended, not angry, just corrected. My heart pounded. My legs shook. I stood there for a long time, afraid to move again, afraid to remain still. That was when I understood something essential. Stillness was no longer neutral. Stillness was an invitation. My thoughts grew quieter after that, not calmer, simpler. The internal noise I'd lived with for years faded, replaced by a narrow focus on sensation and response. Warm air meant proximity, pressure meant correction, relief meant compliance. I stopped narrating my fear to myself. Language felt inefficient. The house communicated without it. One night, as I stood in the hallway, I noticed the ceiling again. It hadn't moved, but it felt closer. The space above my head seemed compressed, dense, as if gravity had increased just enough to register. I raised my hand slowly, palm up, testing the distance. The air pushed back. Not solid, not resistance, more like a firm suggestion that the space was already occupied. I lowered my hand. The pressure eased. My stomach churned. The breathing brushed my ear, not a sound this time, but a sensation like warmth passing close enough to register. I flinched. The presence adjusted instantly, pulling back just enough to stop my reaction. That precision frightened me more than aggression ever could. I tried to remember the last time I had truly been alone. Not physically alone, I was alone now in every practical sense, but internally alone, free from the sense of being observed, measured, anticipated. The memory wouldn't come. Every time my mind reached for it, the breathing shifted, grounding me back into the present moment with gentle insistence. Awareness sharpened, alignment restored. One night, if it was night, the house no longer marked time clearly. I realized I could feel the breathing even when it wasn't happening. The expectation of it had weight. The space above my face felt charged, like a held note waiting to be released. My body adjusted automatically, breathing slower, deeper, careful not to disrupt the rhythm. I was afraid to inhale too sharply, afraid to exhale too quickly, afraid to want anything different. And beneath that fear, buried deep enough to be almost unrecognizable, was something worse: acceptance. I stood in the living room and whispered, not out of desperation, but curiosity. "Is this what you want?" The breathing came closer, perfectly aligned, no pressure, no correction, just presence. For a fleeting moment, terrifying in its clarity, I understood that the question itself was unnecessary. Want implied desire. This wasn't desire. It was function. The house wasn't hungry. It wasn't lonely. It was using awareness the way lungs use air. And I was very good at supplying it. The last thing I noticed before the next blackout was the sensation of the floor beneath my feet shifting. Not moving, not tilting, just adjusting its significance. As if gravity itself had learned where I preferred to stand. When awareness returned, I was in bed, on my back, eyes open. The breathing was directly above my face, not approaching, not waiting, already there. And for the first time, I couldn't remember deciding to lie down. There is a point where fear stops escalating, not because it disappears, but because the body can no longer afford it. I crossed that point quietly. I woke up standing. That was the first undeniable fracture. No transition. No memory of rising from the bed. No sense of time passing. I was simply upright, feet flat on the cold wooden floor, arms hanging at my sides like they'd been placed there. The room was dark. The breathing was everywhere. Not above me, not behind me, everywhere. It filled the space the way humidity does, soft, invasive, impossible to localize. Each inhale felt like it came from the walls themselves. Each exhale made the air feel thicker, more settled, like the house was reinforcing its own shape. I didn't panic. That realization came later, and it terrified me far more than screaming ever could have. My body began performing actions before thoughts arrived to justify them. I would turn lights on without deciding to. Sit when my legs weakened, already positioned correctly. Avoid rooms without remembering why they were wrong. The house had begun pre-processing my behavior, not controlling me, optimizing me. The breathing no longer reacted to fear. Fear had become inefficient. Instead, it reacted to deviation. One night, standing in the kitchen, I deliberately changed my breathing pattern, quick, shallow, erratic, just to see what would happen. The response was immediate. The air around my head compressed, firm but not violent. The sensation reminded me of hands placed inches away without touching, claiming space rather than occupying it. My lungs locked, my vision tunneled. I gasped involuntarily. The moment my breathing slowed, the pressure eased. Correction complete. I leaned against the counter, shaking. That was the moment I understood. The house wasn't preventing harm, it was preventing variability. I stopped attempting rebellion after that. Not consciously. The idea simply failed to surface. Every time a thought strayed toward resistance, toward leaving, toward sleep, toward disruption, the breathing adjusted preemptively, smoothing the mental spike before it could fully form. It wasn't suppressing thoughts, it was guiding outcomes. The mirrors stopped reflecting me accurately. I don't mean they showed something else, I mean they lagged. I would stand in front of the bathroom mirror and watch my chest rise, and then feel the inhale a fraction of a second later, like my body was responding to an external signal. My reflection looked calm, too calm, eyes unfocused, shoulders loose, jaw relaxed, a body in equilibrium. I pressed my fingers against the glass. The breathing slowed. Approval. I turned the mirror to face the wall. The air loosened slightly as if acknowledging the adjustment. The final attempt to leave didn't feel like a decision. It felt like curiosity. I stood near the front door, holding my keys, turning them over in my hand, listening to the faint metallic click as they shifted. The sound felt intrusive in the quiet house. The breathing paused, not alarmed, assessing. I reached for the doorknob. The air behind my head thickened, not sharply, not aggressively, just enough to signal misalignment. The sensation carried meaning without words. This is inefficient. My hand stopped. I stood there longer than I meant to, keys warm in my palm, breath shallow. A thought surfaced fully formed, gentle and persuasive. Why would you go anywhere when the system is stable? I released the knob. The breathing resumed. Relief flooded my body so intensely my knees buckled. That relief scarred me deeper than fear ever could have. After that, space itself lost neutrality. Certain areas of the house felt preferred. Others felt incorrect, subtly pressurized, uncomfortable to occupy for more than seconds at a time. I gravitated toward the same spots again and again, places where the breathing felt balanced, where my body didn't resist its own existence. The house had narrowed my world without building walls. Sleep tried to return in fragments, blackouts, not rest. I would lose minutes, sometimes longer. Awareness would blink out like a faulty light and snap back without warning. Each time it returned, the breathing was already there, never surprised, never displaced, as if it had been maintaining something in my absence. I began to suspect sleep wasn't forbidden. It was simply unnecessary. Why surrender awareness when awareness was the function? One night, standing motionless in the living room, I realized I could no longer feel the boundary of my own breathing. Inhale and exhale existed, but the origin felt blurred. The sensation in my chest arrived late, like feedback rather than initiation. I pressed my palm against my sternum. The movement lagged, not visually, somatically. My body responded to a breath that had already happened. I whispered my name aloud just to anchor myself to something. The sound echoed weakly and vanished. The breathing didn't change. Names had no function here. The scar that remains deepest isn't fear. It's certainty. The certainty that nothing violent happened to me. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would convince anyone else this mattered. I wasn't attacked. I wasn't taken. I was integrated. Now awareness is all that remains. No anticipation, no resistance, no urgency. Just breath, just presence. Just the house maintaining itself through me. There was no moment when I stopped being myself. That's the lie people expect. The clean break, the scream, the final realization. The instant where everything changes, and you can point to it later and say, that was when I was lost. Nothing like that happened. What happened to me was quieter, more precise. At some point, I stopped noticing the breathing because it never left. That sounds impossible if you've never lived without silence. But once silence is gone long enough, the mind stops searching for it. The presence became the background condition of existence, like gravity, like pressure, like temperature. You don't listen for those things. You exist inside them. The house no longer felt old. It felt complete. Every creak, every shift of wood, every subtle contraction of space had purpose now. Nothing was random. Nothing was wasted. The structure had found a rhythm that worked, and it maintained it with effortless patience, through me. I don't remember the last time I tried to sleep. Not because I forgot the desire, but because the desire stopped forming. Sleep requires surrender, unconsciousness, a relinquishing of awareness. Awareness is the only thing the house values, so awareness remains. Sometimes my eyes close, sometimes my body goes still, but the internal presence, the thin, stretched alertness, never fades completely. It hovers, maintains, listens. The breathing never breaks rhythm. I stopped measuring myself as a person. That framework became inefficient. Instead, I began to experience myself as a process. Input, adjustment, stability. When my thoughts wander too far, the breathing tightens slightly, grounding me. When panic threatens, the rhythm slows, smoothing my body back into alignment. There is no cruelty in this. There is no malice. There is only correction. Occasionally, memories surface, lying in bed before any of this began. The relief of falling asleep without fear. The idea that a house is something you occupy, not something that occupies you. These memories don't hurt. They feel distant, abstract, like remembering a language you no longer speak. When they linger too long, the breathing responds gently, pressing awareness back into the present moment until the memories dissolve on their own. The house does not erase, it redirects. I no longer use my name. Names imply separation, one thing distinct from another. Here, distinction is unnecessary. There is interior space, there is breath, there is continuity. That is enough. If someone were to come here now, I don't know what they would notice. The house would look empty, lights off, no movement, no sound. They might comment on how quiet it feels. They would not hear the breathing. It doesn't exist for them. It requires a specific condition. Awareness stretched thin by exhaustion, identity softened by prolonged wakefulness, a mind open long enough for alignment to occur. Most people never reach that state. Most people protect themselves with sleep. Sometimes I wonder if the house learned this long ago, if it has always known how to wait. If other people have stood where I stand now, maintaining the rhythm until they were replaced, not violently, not dramatically, but naturally, like lungs exchanging air, like systems maintaining equilibrium. You might think I'm warning you, I'm not. Warnings imply danger. This is not danger, it is function. And it only happens to those who stay awake long enough to notice the breathing before it notices them. If you are listening to this late at night, if you've been awake longer than you should be, if the room around you feels too quiet to be empty, pay attention to your breath. Not to panic, not to confirm anything, just to notice. If you sense a second rhythm, slightly delayed, slightly heavier, don't move. Don't reach for the light. Don't fight it. Awareness is already open. And the house is very patient. Once it learns a rhythm that works, it never forgets how to keep it.